What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT, joining you on this very messy Monday, man. It is storming outside, so you guys might hear a little bit of thunder in the background, but that's just what comes with living in Florida. Some days it looks really nice, and then out of nowhere, 30 seconds later, it's storming and it's messy, and all kinds of thunder is going all day long. So the Florida weather is very bipolar. But I got a really exciting episode for you guys today, man. I'm going to be giving you guys my reactions and thoughts to the Netflix quarterback documentary series. I watched it over the weekend. I have a lot of interesting takeaways from that documentary. And then we got to discuss the DeAndre Hopkins aftermath. You know, what's next for the New England Patriots after not being able to sign D-Hop? And does D-Hop make the Tennessee Titans a playoff team this season? And also, on the college football side of things, Brent Venables. A couple of friends that I have really don't believe in Brent Venables as the head coach at Oklahoma. And I keep hearing a lot of people utter the statement that he may be in over his head down there at Oklahoma. So I'm going to be giving my thoughts on Brent Venables and how good are the Florida Gators going to be this year, man. Because on paper, it doesn't look like Florida is going to be all that great. They have an over-under win total of 5.5. But I kind of think that Florida can overachieve this year because I'm a big believer in Billy Napier. If you haven't already, make sure that you leave a like and subscribe to the channel. We go live every day at 5 p.m. Eastern time, Monday through Friday. Make sure that you check out the JT Sports Podcast. We're not just available on YouTube. You can find us on all podcasting platforms: Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts from, you can find the JT Sports Podcast. If you support the channel, go ahead and give us a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. We're trying to get to 100 5-star reviews before the season begins. We're really close to getting 100 5-star reviews on Apple, man. So go ahead, give us a 5-star review. It's free. It only takes 3 seconds to do, and it's the best way to support the channel if you enjoy the content. So I binge watched the Netflix quarterback documentary series, and you know, I was really impressed. This is one of the best documentaries that I've watched in all of my lifetime, and I'm not really a big documentary person, but you know, this was a football documentary covering quarterbacks, so of course I was going to end up watching this thing, and I even bought a Netflix subscription to do so. And watching this documentary series really gave me the answer to one of my biggest questions, which has been, what really separates the elite quarterbacks from the average quarterbacks, and the average quarterbacks from the really bad quarterbacks? And I feel like the 3 QBs that they picked to follow for this series were absolutely perfect. You got Patrick Mahomes, who is the best quarterback in the league, right? And by the way, he takes Kansas City to the Super Bowl in this documentary because it was taking place last year. So that was a huge get for Peyton Manning and Omaha Productions and the NFL media who helped produce this, because what are the odds that one of the QBs you pick ends up going to the postseason? And then you got Kirk Cousins, who, although he isn't as good as Patrick Mahomes, he's a pretty solid quarterback. So then he takes Minnesota to the playoffs, and then you got Marcus Mariota, who gets benched, and the Falcons weren't even all that good last year. And then you got the drama with, did he quit on the Falcons? Now, when I look at Patrick Mahomes throughout this whole entire documentary, what stands out to me is that he's just that dude, man. Literally, this dude, the way he trains, the way he watches film is just so different from the other 2 quarterbacks in this documentary series. You see, Kirk Cousins, when he watches film, it's like he watches it, But when you compare it to how he watches and talks about film and what he's seeing, Patrick Mahomes has this dumbed down to the point where he's looking at how defensive linemen position themselves, how they react to the snap, the give off tells if they're blitzing or if they're dropping back in coverage. This is one of the things that I feel is really important to being successful, not only as a football player, but as a coach as well. You have to be able to pay attention to the small details, because the small details add up. And Patrick Mahomes, not only does he pay attention to the small details when it comes to watching film, but also in his preparation and his training. He trains his body to be able to handle getting tackled and bent awkwardly. And he also trains his body to make all those crazy off-platform throws. It's dumbed down to the point that his trainer has a certain way that, they do stretches that help the body build resiliency to being bent awkwardly. Like, Patrick Mahomes is just one of those dudes that just understands what it takes to be a phenomenal football player. And I think the biggest takeaway that I got from this is that elite quarterbacks, when the game is on the line, they always find a way to win 95% of the time. There's not too many times guys like Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow come up short. Because you want to know why? Every time they need to make a big play to put their team in position to win, they come through. They're the most reliable. Meanwhile, you got Kirk Cousins. He came through a good amount of times last year for the Minnesota Vikings, but in the biggest game of the season, in the playoffs, he wasn't able to get the job done. And then you got Marcus Mariota, who, unlike Patrick Mahomes and Kirk Cousins, I don't think he ever came through for the Atlanta Falcons last season. As a matter of fact, every time Marcus Mariota had the ball in his hands late in games, he was a liability. He had a fumble in one game, and then he threw 2 game-sealing interceptions throughout the season. They nearly would have lost to Seattle if it wasn't for the defense bailing them out in that game. So for Marcus Mariota, I was able to obviously tell what separates some of the worst quarterbacks in the game from even the Kirk Cousins of the world. Because at least the Kirk Cousins of the world, if you give them an ideal situation, they're going to be able to win a few primetime games for you. But they're also going to win the games for you that come close against teams that maybe you shouldn't be down against. Or maybe if you're going against a good team, but it's not in prime time, they may be able to get you a couple of comeback wins as well. But the elite QBs like Patrick Mahomes, when the lights are the brightest, that's where they're at their best. And then you look at Marcus Mariota, it's kind of like the Falcons were better off trying to find ways to win close games without needing the ball to be in his hands. And then you look at the situation with how he handled getting benched. It was really awkward to me. And honestly, you really don't know who's lying, because somebody's lying, nobody's telling the truth. So apparently, for the last couple of games of the season, the Falcons wanted to see what they had in Desmond Ridder. So apparently, Arthur Smith, he ends up taking Marcus Mariota to the office one day throughout that week. And then, they were supposed to have a discussion about Marcus Mariota's future as far as him being the starter for this season. So, according to Arthur Smith, the way this conversation went, hey, Marcus, we're going in a different direction. We're going with the future. And Desmond Ridder, we want to see what we have in him for these last final games. We don't have a shot at the playoffs, so we might as well throw him out there. But, however, we still would like you to be the backup. Now, Arthur Smith didn't tell us that directly, that he told Marcus Mariota that he was going to be the backup behind Desmond Ridder for the rest of the season. Because according from Marcus Mariota's perspective, him and Arthur Smith, when they sat down, they discussed, the future and Desmond Ridder starting out for the remainder of this season to see what they have in him. But he also talked about how he had an injury wrong with his knee or something going on with his knee, and he had to get some surgery for it. Now, apparently, Arthur Smith, when he gets wind of this and why Marcus Mariota isn't at the facilities, he's shocked because he's like, man, I ain't know nothing about no injury, so who do you guys think is lying? Do you think that Arthur Smith is telling the truth, or do you think that Marcus Mariota is telling the truth? Because in the documentary, they did show him getting surgery. So it's not like he was lying. Maybe he didn't tell Arthur Smith about it, but he did get surgery. Now, was this a surgery that maybe he could have gotten done after the season? Maybe. But even then, it's like, if you're in Marcus Mariota's situation, like, if you got an injury and it's hindering you and it's hurting you, like, why wait to the end of the season to get it addressed when you can just go ahead and get it addressed now and miss the rest of the year? You're the backup. You're going with the rookie. You want to see what you have in him. I'm a veteran. Why am I still on the team? Why am I still, practicing through an injury that's hurting me just to be the backup? Like, I kind of see where Marcus Mariota is coming from, but at the same time, people are going to go with the whole character thing. Oh, it's just good character. Even if Marcus Mariota had to get surgery, he probably should have waited towards the end of the season or after the year was over to get that surgery and helped out and be a backup and a good mentor to Desmond Ridder. And listen, like, that makes sense from a fan perspective, but a lot of us got to stop acting like we always operate off high moral ethical codes. The NFL is a business, and at the same time, these players got lives too. He just had a kid at that time too, so it kind of did make a lot of sense for him to just ring it in on the season, be around his daughter. Like, I kind of understand that. I mean, is it the right thing, from a football fan perspective? No. You probably don't agree with it, but I think we at least have to understand where he was coming from. And I'm pretty sure a lot of y'all probably, if you was in Marcus Mariota's situation, would have did the same thing. And that's the point that I'm trying to emphasize. Like, a lot of people on social media be acting like they just have this high moral code. It's the same thing when it comes to these player contract situations. Oh, man, he's being greedy. Knowing doggone well, if you was in that same situation, most of you guys, 95% of you guys, would be doing the same thing and acting out in the same way that these players do to get paid. You want to know why? Because it works. So, when you look at Marcus Mariota, if you are in his shoes, you probably would have did the same thing. Now, from a fan perspective, you probably can say, yeah, like, he quit on the team, but I kind of feel like you got to understand where he was coming from too at that time. You don't got to agree with it, but at least try to understand from the perspective. So you look at Kirk Cousins, I came away after this documentary really liking Kirk Cousins. Like, I'm not going to lie. Kirk Cousins is what people like to call a minimalist. They don't need much to survive. They can survive as long as they have the necessities. Like, Kirk Cousins, this dude is all football. He's all football to the point that he doesn't care to waste time in picking out his outfits to the games and what to wear. He lets his wife do that so he can use that time to dedicate towards studying film or training. And Kirk Cousins is one of those guys that even though he gets paid millions of dollars a year, he doesn't really go crazy with his purchases, really. He is a pretty minimalistic guy who still shops at Walmart, Old Navy, JCPenney, Sam's Club. Like, he's somebody that doesn't really care about all those flashy things. I guess that's why the whole thing with the chains on, kind of goes hella viral every time it's posted on social media, because that's not really Kirk Cousins' nature for real, to be, be flaunty, be flashy. He's a guy that's, minimalistic. As long as he has what's necessary, he's good. He doesn't really care for all that other big stuff. And another thing about Kirk Cousins is that this dude is really tough. After watching this, I was looking at the Minnesota Vikings offensive line. I was like, bruh, Like, y'all damn near got Kirk Cousins killed. Like, against the Washington Commanders, he got smashed to the ground by somebody. And you're going to have the player that smashed Kirk Cousins from the Commanders going to pat him on the side of the back, talking about some, man, you all right, man? It's like,
come on now, dog. Come on, man.
Don't do that, man, like that, man. You know you hurt that dude. And then he had like these big scars, well, like bruises on the side of his stomach. It was just like, golly. Trying to get through an NFL season without getting injured is nearly impossible. That's why I kind of tell people now, good coaches can win in spite of injuries. Now, they may not be able to overcome injuries to all their star players, but as long as they have some of their core players, they should still be able to win, because if you're in the playoffs, nearly everybody's injured. Even if it isn't on the injury report, somebody is dealing with something, rather if it's bruises or just, the overall wear and tear that comes with a football season. Like, high school football is a grind. I mean, just going through the off-season workout program in high school, even I was having days when I was sore. And the high school football seasons are like 9-10 weeks at most in Florida. So imagine a full 17-game regular season. Like, these guys get worn down. And people just think about, how these players feel after the game. And after 1 week, like, these hits legitimately do add up week after week after week. And you can see that with Kirk Cousins and just what he was going through. And a lot of the stuff he was going through wasn't even listed on the injury report. And then you look at Kirk Cousins, right? Well, Kirk Cousins, this was also somebody who had to sacrifice his body pretty much. Like, Kirk Cousins could have very well had taken a couple of games off and said, you know what, I can't play through this injury. Now, you look at Patrick Mahomes, he kind of did the same thing. Patrick Mahomes damn near had no ankle when it ended up getting injured during the divisional round playoff matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And yet, Mahomes, he's arguing with Andy Reid to not go get the x-ray like a lunatic. It's like, bro, like, you really don't even know if your ankle is even completely broken, fam. Like, you just worried about getting some tape and getting back out there. Like, go get an x-ray, fam. Like, I understand the competitive nature of the NFL and you want to win, but Jesus, man, like, at least care a little bit about your health. So Patrick Mahomes ends up getting incredibly mad because he has to go get an x-ray. Like, you ever played football and you had a teammate that got really mad and he just took his helmet off and just threw it on the sideline? And then you always had that one coach that ended up yelling at him saying, hey, boy, you better go pick up that helmet. You throw that helmet again, you better keep it on the ground and go turn those pads in. So this man, Patrick Mahomes, was incredibly frustrated because he had to go get an x-ray, and you know he was going to be right back on the field. And that's what I was saying with these elite quarterbacks. They always find a way to come through despite all odds. So Patrick Mahomes, I find it ironic that this dude is operating on pretty much one leg, because if you have a dead ankle, like, it's kind of nearly impossible to move with the other leg. But despite that, he's still making plays and making throws and putting Kansas City in the position to ultimately win the game. You know, he had an injury that was bad to the point where he probably shouldn't have been back out there. And then you look at what he did the following week in the AFC Conference Championship game. It's like this dude always found the way to dig deep. Every time the game was on the line, nobody cared about his ankle. All he cared about was making the play. Rather, if he had to run for 10 plus yards to get the first down in a crucial moment of the game. Like, it was one game where his ankle is still badly injured and he still finds a way to convert a 3rd and long with his legs. I'm like, bro, what is wrong with you, Patrick Mahomes? Like, what are you made of? And then even then, a little interesting side note, he has something a little bit different with his spine that allows him to do all these no-look passes. Like, I forgot what it is per se, what is with his spine development that allows him to be able to make all these crazy throws and these no-look passes. So apparently, like, the way his spine is built, like, he can still kind of, like, turn his head a little bit to the point where his peripheral vision is so strong, he can still see a good amount of the other side of the field. Like, I don't know if it's worded exactly like that, but I know it's something like that. I just know it's something ridiculous. And this man, Patrick Mahomes, he's like a meta-human. Every time he needs to get a big play, he gets it, even in the Super Bowl. And even then, he was on the sideline giving credit to Jalen Hurts. Like, this man, Patrick Mahomes, one thing about him, like, he understands when he's going to be in a situation where he has to prepare himself to make a big play. He's already mentally ready to come to the understanding that this is a game that's going to be won in his hands. Other quarterbacks, when they get in tough situations like Kirk Cousins and Marcus Mariota, like, they don't look as enthusiastic to go out there and go win the game, especially Marcus Mariota. Like, every time a moment got big for him, it's like his eyes got big and he got clumsy. Extremely clumsy, even to the point where he ended up fumbling the ball on a read option at the end of one game. Like, everybody knows who played football from a Pop Warner level, the coaches tell you that if you're running the read option, you got to make sure that if that defensive end crashes down, that you know what you're doing with the football. You cannot be completely indecisive with the read option because it's a fast moving play. You're making one read, defensive end, contain, you hand it off. He crashes down, you keep it. And for Marcus Mariota, he was indecisive with that. And he was indecisive pretty often. Patrick Mahomes, one thing about him, he's not indecisive. He always knows where to go in most situations. He always has several options. And if he doesn't have anything, he's going to create something out of nothing. Kirk Cousins, he couldn't really create anything out of nothing. It's like he just needs a given situation to execute. And even sometimes, like, he can get a little bit in his head where I think he can kind of lose confidence in himself. And Marcus Mariota, like, man, I see why he's now a backup with the Philadelphia Eagles. And, I think he's a solid quarterback. I don't think he's necessarily like a guy who, if he comes in, like, you can't win with at all. But as far as being your long-term starter throughout the course of a season, it's just like, if you're a team that doesn't have to win a lot of close games and you can win every game without a lot of difficulty, then you can probably be successful with the Marcus Mariota. But that's unrealistic because most games in the NFL are pretty close. So my overall takeaways and thoughts and reactions to the quarterback is that this was a very incredible documentary series. Well done. I love the camera angles, how it pretty much was like you was right in the action with the quarterbacks. Even one play when Patrick Mahomes was in the red zone, they really gave us like a very great camera view. It's like you literally could see the game up close. It's like you were standing there and you just see him going through his progressions. And one thing about it is that the NFL game moves really fast. So it's like you don't really have any margin for error to not know what you're going to do. You got to have a lot of confidence when you're going through your progressions. And you don't really have time to second guess yourself, because if you second guess yourself like Marcus Mariota, you make mistakes. It's like even if you don't really know where you want to go, you still have to figure out a way to make the play be successful. And Patrick Mahomes does a very great job at that. And Kirk Cousins isn't really somebody that's a creator. And then when you look at the leadership qualities, I don't really feel like Marcus Mariota is a bad leader, but I don't think he's somebody that is going to galvanize the troops. Just keeping it 100. Like, if Marcus Mariota was my quarterback, I would not be motivated based off his pregame speeches. I just feel like he's somebody that's a solid, quiet leader who leads by example. I don't really feel like he's going to be somebody that elevates you. Now, Kirk Cousins, I think he's a pretty solid leader, but I kind of feel the same way I do about him like I do Marcus Mariota in terms of a leadership standpoint. It's like the teammates like Marcus Mariota and Kirk Cousins, but it's kind of like they're not guys that are going to energize you. Now you look at Patrick Mahomes, and I do think that Patrick Mahomes has a little bit of an advantage in terms of leadership over Kirk Cousins and Marcus Mariota, given from the fact that he already has the reputation being one of the best quarterbacks of our time, basically being that dude who you always know is going to come through for you the majority of the times. It's like, if he tells you something, like, you're going to have the utmost confidence to believe it because it's Patrick Mahomes. I just feel like it's a different belief when you got a Patrick Mahomes or a Joe Burrow or even a Tom Brady back there. You just have a different level of confidence, and it just makes you play so much better. It's like, any wide receiver that plays for Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, or played with Tom Brady, they make it seem like they will run through a brick wall for those guys. Like, they will lay their bodies on the line to make plays for those quarterbacks. And meanwhile, you look at a Kirk Cousins, it's like, he's cool, the locker room likes him, but he's not somebody that, if he comes up to you, is going to get you amped up and got you back believing in yourself. And even Kirk Cousins, it's like, the thing with Kirk Cousins is like, he's one of those players, when he ends up making a mistake, it kind of takes him a little bit of time to get over it. You just can't come up to him and be like, oh man, this straight, you got it, because he'll snap on you. Leave me alone, man. Like, he's one of those people, like, you just can't even come up to him and give him no reassurance. You just got to give him his space, and there's nothing wrong with that. Because that's the nature of an NFL team. Not every player has the same personality. That's part of being a great head coach. You have to understand the personality of your players and how to react to how they respond to certain situations, so you can get them able to play at a higher level. And that's what good player coaches are able to do, like Mike Tomlin. And you look at Kevin O'Connell, I think that's kind of a little bit of an underrated thing with him. Like, we think about how good he is with the X's and O's on offense, but I think he does a pretty good job at understanding his players and how to give them space, and the guys that he needs to get up in their face, to get them going, to get them playing at their best levels. And with Kirk Cousins, he realizes that, you know, he needs a guy who, when things go wrong, he needs some space. He needs to cool off. And in tough situations, Kirk Cousins kind of prevailed, surprisingly, against the Indianapolis Colts. Like, I didn't think they was going to be able to come back, judging from this documentary, just from how Kirk Cousins was responding. He's like, you know, I'm aggravated, I'm agitated. Like, almost sounded like he damn near was done with the game. And you look at Marcus Mariota, like, it doesn't really seem like he be thrilled for those big moments. It just be like, okay, like, here it goes. Whatever happens, happens. And then you got Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes is like, he already know what time it is. Like, against the LA Chargers, he was like, let's go offense. Like, we going to have to score. He already knew that the game was going to come down to him being able to lead the team down the field. It's like he embraced the big moments. And one thing that you always hear about some of the greatest athletes of all time, not just the NFL players, but in the NBA and the MLB, they always were excited and they lived for the big opportunities to get the game-winning home run or to get the game-winning basket. And meanwhile, you got guys like Marcus Mariota, that's kind of like, it's like, he don't really be up. He don't really be energized for the big moments. Meanwhile, you got Patrick Mahomes. He's like, let's go. Let's get ready. Let's get this thing moving. So when you look at their personal lives, you know, I feel like all these quarterbacks put in about the same amount of time when it comes to watching film, at least judging from this documentary. Now, I would have loved if they would have given us, you know, some descriptions about what time it was, what day of the week it was, so you can get a better understanding of when they do certain activities or when they decide to watch film. But it seems like all these quarterbacks put in a good amount of time watching film. Now, when you look at Patrick Mahomes, I think that Patrick Mahomes probably had about at least as amount of time as Kirk Cousins and Marcus Mariota did to be able to have the same amount of preparation time as those guys had, because he had more responsibilities off the field, not just with his kids, but also with the fact that, you know, he's the face of the league pretty much. So he has to do endorsement shoots. He's also having to attend parties. It's like Patrick Mahomes always has something going on with his life. It's like he comes home, he trains, he watches film, and in between all that, he still has like something social to do throughout the day. And even his family said that during the football season, they don't even get a lot of chances to spend time with them. So when they do, it's kind of rare. So Patrick Mahomes is just one of those guys that's just locked in. Now, Kirk Cousins, he's locked in too. Like I mentioned earlier, this is somebody who said that he doesn't really care about dressing up for real. He lets his wife do that so he can put that time into football. And Marcus Mariota, he's pretty all football. One thing about Marcus Mariota is that I don't think he went into a game where he wasn't really prepared. Like, I always feel like he was pretty prepared. I feel like he put in a good amount of time of film study, but I think that goes to the biggest overall theme that I started off this segment with, right? I told you guys when I started this that there's a difference between elite quarterbacks, okay, solid quarterbacks, and bad QBs. And it isn't preparation all the time. You know, for guys like Patrick Mahomes, you say, oh, he just puts in more time than the other quarterbacks. Like, all these quarterbacks put in effort. All these quarterbacks are putting in hell of hours of film study, training. Like, if you're not putting in the time, honestly, you're most likely not even going to be successful as a low-end starter in the league. It's like everybody, I think, is putting on a good amount of, you know, time when it comes to film study and preparedness and training. Now, you do have some guys that just slack off, but that may just be a maturity thing. But it seems like to me, if you don't even put in just like 2-3 hours of watching film or any training, you're not going to be able to even make a roster. So I think with Patrick Mahomes, what really separates him wasn't, you know, how he watches film, even though he has like the little small things that he picks up when he's dissecting film and breaking down defenses, trying to study for tendencies. I feel like everybody has their different ways of watching film and the different things they look at to better understand what the defense is throwing at them. But I feel like for Patrick Mahomes, though, what really separates him is the fact that he's just so much talented and so superior talent-wise to Kirk Cousins and Marcus Mariota. And honestly, when you think about some of the best quarterbacks in the league right now, like, they always have something, a trait that stands out that just makes them so better than their peers. Lamar Jackson, what stands out about him? The fact that he's a pretty solid passer, but he's probably the most athletically gifted quarterback to ever be in the NFL. It's just so difficult to be able to game plan for that. Justin Herbert, this is somebody that's a statue in the pocket. He's just hard to bring down. He's like Superman back there. He can just make these incredible throws with hella arm strength and velocity despite defenders caving in on him. And Joe Burrow, just how cerebral he is. Patrick Mahomes gave a lot of respect to Joe Burrow, and as he should. Like, he knows that Joe Burrow is like his apparent tier. And even Jalen Hurts, like, he had a lot of respect for what Jalen Hurts did in the Super Bowl. So you look at Mahomes, he's just so ahead of, you know, the other two QBs in this documentary series. He's just so more talented. And when you're so talented like he is, you can get away with certain things. Like that play that he made to the Clyde Edwards-Helaire on the back of the end zone. Like, Kirk Cousins and Marcus Mariota would never be able to do that. Most of the stuff that Mahomes did in these late game situations, Kirk Cousins and Marcus Mariota could not be able to physically pull off. Sometimes these quarterbacks just aren't talented enough to be able to get to the level of a Patrick Mahomes. You at least have to be very elite at something to become the top at your position in the NFL. Even if you're undersized like you're a Drew Brees. Even though Drew Brees wasn't as physically gifted as some of the other QBs he came into the league with, you know what separated him? He's one of the most accurate quarterbacks that ever throw the football. He had elite accuracy. He had elite understanding of defenses. Peyton Manning, he was an elite thrower of the football. He had a great arm, elite IQ, and elite accuracy and really good pocket awareness. Tom Brady was elite when it came to his pocket mobility and his poise. It's like the elite QBs have certain overall skills that just gives them the advantage over some of the average or solid QBs. Like the guys like Jimmy G, Derek Carr, Ryan Tannehill. Those guys, they don't really have anything that they do that really stands out. They don't really have a signature trait. When you ask somebody about Patrick Mahomes, you ask somebody, what's something that stands out to you about Patrick Mahomes? They're going to be like either his arm strength or his ability to improvise and make throws from crazy body positions. Lamar Jackson, somebody's going to say his athleticism. Like any elite quarterback, when you ask them what is the trait that stands out to them, they're going to tell you something. Meanwhile, you ask somebody, man, what stands out to you about Derek Carr? People going to laugh at you, man. Like, they're going to be like, what you mean what stands out to me about Derek Carr? I mean, like, he's a solid QB. That's exactly what people are going to tell you. He's just a solid QB. You feel me? And y'all let me know if I'm wrong, but let me ask y'all in the chat. What do you feel stands out the most about Jimmy Garoppolo? And you know what you guys are going to tell me? Nothing. He's just a solid quarterback. Same thing with some of these other QBs. It's just like with Daniel Jones. What stands out to you about Daniel Jones? Oh, well, he's a really good runner. He's a solid runner. Okay, but it's like, does that really stand out to you? What really makes Daniel Jones a top-level QB? It's like, when you look at Patrick Mahomes compared to Mariota and Cousins, it's just like he's just a man amongst boys. And Kirk Cousins, though, he's really talented too, and so is Marcus Mariota. It's just that Patrick Mahomes just knows how to execute. That's really it. Marcus Mariota wasn't able to execute on the level of Kirk Cousins or even Patrick Mahomes. Even though, you know, you probably want to say Kirk Cousins' level is something that would be a little bit more fair to compare Marcus Mariota to. But it's like Marcus Mariota isn't even on Kirk Cousins' tier, which is why I still have a lot of respect for guys like Kirk Cousins and Derek Carr and Dak Prescott, because even though they're not elite quarterbacks, they are still really good QBs. You can win a Super Bowl with the Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins, say what you want to in primetime games, but in all of the biggest moments for the Minnesota Vikings, he came through nearly every single time, unless they got blown out. So you can win with a Kirk Cousins if you give him the right situation. Now, he can't create. He's not really going to be good in chaos, but you got a tough quarterback that's a fighter, man. And Patrick Mahomes, he's just a complete package. Now, Marcus Mariota is like, he has the really good physical attributes, the speed, you know, pretty decent arm. But it's like, other than that, what really stands out about him? And was he able to execute in the big moments for the Falcons? He wasn't. So Marcus Mariota, his inability to execute in crunch time, he was a little clumsy. You know, Marcus Mariota, I now understand why he's no longer a starting quarterback in the NFL. And I know it's a little harsh, but just watching this documentary series, it's not like he didn't put in the time, but he just wasn't somebody who could just get it done when it mattered. And too many times he costed the team wins. Turnovers are really important. One thing about great quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes, he can make a mistake and he's able to come back and overcome it. Meanwhile, somebody like Marcus Mariota, not only does he make mistakes, but he makes them in the worst moments of the game. So these are my thoughts and my reactions to the Netflix quarterback docuseries. Let me know what you guys think about it down in the comment section down below. This segment went a lot longer than what I expected, man. We've been talking about this thing for like 40 minutes. But the Netflix quarterback docuseries was really good. I had a really fun time watching it. Somebody said Derek Carr's eye shadow stands out. Y'all funny. Ryan Tannehill is a warrior. He leads the team, stands in, and will take a hit due to deliver a pass, and he beats all the QBs supposed to be better. Titans are great as underdogs. That's because of Tanny. Warren Douglas said, I guess. So let's segue to this. The New England Patriots were one of the finalists in the DeAndre Hopkins sweepstakes. And I feel like the New England Patriots and Bill Belichick needed DeAndre Hopkins more than the Tennessee Titans did. And the reason why I believe that is because you see Mike Vrabel and the Tennessee Titans, although they had a whole lot receiver, when you look at his situation compared to Bill Belichick's situation, Mike Vrabel could afford to miss out on not having a D-Hop and having a bad season because he probably is going to remain Tennessee's head coach next year. Meanwhile, for Bill Belichick, he doesn't have that same security in terms of his future. It seems like if the Patriots don't make it to the postseason this year, it's wraps for Bill Belichick. And him not being able to land DeAndre Hopkins is a huge L. Now, who do the Patriots really have who you can look at in their wide receiver corner and be like, oh yeah, like we can really depend on him? You have Kendrick Bourne, you have Juju Smith-Schuster. Those guys are okay, but they're not true number ones. So what's next for the Patriots after missing out on DeAndre Hopkins? What does DeAndre Hopkins signing with the Tennessee Titans mean for the Patriots' future and Bill Belichick's future as their head coach? Because when you look at their roster right now, this is a team that probably is going to finish last in the AFC East. And the only way they don't is if the Jets, Dolphins, or Bills just underperform. And even if New England signed DeAndre Hopkins, they still would be the worst team in the AFC East. Even if they had Dalvin Cook and D-Hop, they still would be one of those teams that you look at and you say, I don't know. They could be, but they just aren't. They're just one of those teams that you just look at on paper and you're like, you know, they're just missing a couple of pieces. So for the Patriots not getting D-Hop, that is a massive blow to any Patriots fans who at least thought there was a small glimpse of them being able to be a playoff team this year if they had D-Hop. You re-signed Devontae Parker, dog.
Come on now, dog. Come on, man.
Are you serious? It's like Devontae Parker is a solid receiver. He's a really good 50-50 ball receiver. But the problem with Devontae Parker is that every pass you throw to him is a 50-50 ball. And the thing with Bill Belichick that I think a lot of people get misunderstood about him is that they make it seem like he doesn't try. Bill Belichick has tried to figure out the offense. He drafted N'Keal Harry in the first round. He just doesn't really understand how much the game has changed from what you look for from your personnel at receiver. This is just my opinion. We don't know if this is Bill Belichick thinking verbatim, but this is what my job is, to speculate. And, you know, kind of try to make sense of things for you guys. So, Bill B, he used to be somebody that kind of was a little bit ahead of the curve on offense. Okay, you got to remember, the slot receiver position wasn't really utilized until Wes Welker went to New England and became an all-pro with the Patriots. And then they ended up going crazy with the two tight end sets with Aaron Hernandez, the murderer, and Rob Gronkowski. So you look at Bill Belichick, he used to be somebody that was really good at being able to adapt. But now it just seems like with the older he gets And ever since Tom Brady left the Patriots organization, he's never been able to adapt. And without DeAndre Hopkins now, you look at this receiving core, you're kind of looking at Bill O'Brien to turn, glitter to gold. Honestly, Kendrick Bourne and Juju, they're okay. But who else? Devontae Parker? This is a really, really big L for the New England Patriots not being able to get D-Hop. They really needed D-Hop more than Tennessee. Mike Vrabel, he's going to be there next season despite what happens this season. Bill Belichick doesn't have that same assurance. Mac Jones, for a young quarterback, having a D-Hop level wide receiver is everything. Think about Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Tua, Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill. When Josh Allen got Stephon Diggs, his play transcended to another level. Jalen Hurts, look what happened this season when he got A.J. Brown and he was throwing to Devontae Smith. You see, having a elite receiver for your young quarterback can help them in their development. And Bill Belichick has been unable to put Mac Jones in situations to really be able to thrive. That's why I keep telling people, I really don't think Mac Jones is a bad quarterback. When he had an ideal situation his rookie season, he was really impressive as a rookie. But last year, he had a defensive coordinator as his OC calling the plays. You think that's an ideal situation for a second-year QB? I think any QB would struggle in that situation that's going into year 2 of their career. Look at Trevor Lawrence with Urban Meyer. He was awful. And then he gets a real head coach in Doug Peterson. You see what happens? So for the New England Patriots, not getting D-Hop makes Bill Belichick's future even more cloudy. Robert Kraft has been throwing a lot of subliminals at Bill Belichick. Every time Bill Belichick makes it seem like he can't do something due to financial reasons, Robert Kraft always comes out and kind of indirectly says, man, money ain't an issue for us. So I think there's kind of a good amount of pressure on Bill Belichick to make something shake this season. And you kind of hope that the Patriots kind of can make something shake. But for them to have a chance at finishing above 4th place in this division, they need some team in this division to underperform. And who is that team going to be? Even if you think the Jets or the Dolphins are going to underperform, those teams are still better rosterized, and I think they have good enough coaching as the Patriots do right now. Even though Bill Belichick, he's still a better overall coach than those guys, but the coaches that he's in the division with are no slouches. Not getting D-Hop is a huge blow to the Patriots' aspirations of having a successful season. I wonder what they're going to do, but I think what's next for the Patriots is that you're going to be in for a season where you're not going to get blown out. You're going to be competitive. You're the Patriots. You're going to be pretty well coached by Bill Belichick. Bill O'Brien's going to have your offense being serviceable. But are you just going to be one of those teams that's just going to rely on out-coaching your way to the postseason? Because eventually you're going to face off against teams in your division that are just as good when it comes to schematics and coaching as you, but even more talented. And the team that always is the most talented with great coaching normally prevails. And it's going to be incredibly tough asking Bill Belichick and Bill O'Brien to X's and O's their way through this season with the roster that they have. The Patriots probably are going to miss the playoffs this year. And Bill Belichick, this might be the final year that we see him roaming the sidelines with the title of head coach for the New England Patriots. The Tennessee Titans now have DeAndre Hopkins. Is this now a playoff team? Now, their defense is going to be really outstanding this year, right? they probably could end up having a top 10 defense. But offensively, though, even though now you have DeAndre Hopkins, a proven number one wide receiver, you got Ryan Tannehill, who's still a capable quarterback, you got Derrick Henry, I still don't know if Tennessee's odds of being able to get into the playoffs increases dramatically. Now, obviously, they got a way better shot making the postseason now than what they did prior to having D-Hop. But I don't think that with D-Hop, they're one of those teams that you look at and you say, oh yeah, for sure, they're going to be in the postseason. You look at the Baltimore Ravens, the Cincinnati Bengals, you look at them and you're like, yeah, for sure, I'm pretty confident. If I had money to bet on these teams making it to the playoffs, I would bet on them. Meanwhile, you look at the Tennessee Titans and they're one of those teams that you say, I don't know. The Titans are a team that you say, I mean, they could. They have a good chance. You got Mike Vrabel. You know one thing about Mike Vrabel, he's a really good coach. And I think he's too good of a coach for this team to not be competitive in most of their games. Don't forget, they took Kansas City on the road in Arrowhead to overtime with Malik Willis at quarterback. So you got to give them a lot of props to that. They were fighting and scrapping with Joshua Dobbs at quarterback, trying to win the AFC South last year. They had pretty much scrap pieces starting because some of their better players were on injury reserve. So the Titans are a team that's always going to be ultra feisty. They're going to be scrappy. Even if you're better than them from a talent standpoint, they're just one of those teams that perfectly embodies the personality of their head coach in a good way. Now, I don't think that with D-Hop, though, they still are going to be able to get to the playoffs. The AFC is way tough. It's way too tough this year. If you don't have a great quarterback, it's really going to be difficult for you to be a playoff team. And if we go team by team, right, with just some of the teams that are the favorites to win the AFC, are the Titans going to get in the playoffs over Cincinnati or the Baltimore Ravens? Probably not. Okay, Pittsburgh Steelers, Cleveland Browns, possibly. All right, let's go to the AFC East. Do you think they are going to get into the playoffs over the Buffalo Bills? No. New York Jets? I mean, possibly depending on how things go, but if things go great for Green Bay, well, if things go great for the New York Jets, then the Jets are probably going to be in the playoffs over Tennessee, and they probably are a more talented team than the Titans are, at least on paper. And then you look at the Miami Dolphins, as long as Tua stays healthy, they're going to be in the playoffs. So right now, for the Titans to get into the playoffs, they need to at least be able to win 10 games, and they need some things to kind of go their way with winning this division. Because if they don't win this division, it's going to be hard to get into the playoffs. You could be a 10-win team and still not make it in. And everybody thinks that adding another seed and having that 7th seed there gives opportunity for 8-win teams to get in there. Like, not in the AFC. I'm pretty confident that a 10-win team is probably going to have the 7th seed in the AFC this year. And excuse me if I said NFC, I meant AFC. Because the AFC is where some of the best quarterbacks reside. And for the Tennessee Titans, their best chance of making it to the postseason is being able to win their division, which is definitely possible. The Jaguars, I don't really think are locks, even though I think they're the favorites, but I do think that Tennessee isn't too far behind them. I think the Texans can make things a little bit interesting. I don't think the Colts are going to be all that good this year with how inconsistent I believe Anthony Richardson is going to be this year. And with DeAndre Hopkins being that elite presence on the outside, that's going to open things up for Treylon Burks and make his second season a little bit more easier. But is your offensive line going to hold up, though? Because their offensive line doesn't look good right now. When you can coach your way and scheme your way around things or certain weaknesses that you may have, but if you're not good up front, you're not good up front. There's only so much that you can do to, avoid having that weakness exploited. if you're not good on your offensive line, there's only so far you can go. And for the Tennessee Titans, their offensive line just isn't really good. I mean, they got a couple of players there who could make some plays and could be pretty good for them on the outside with D-Hop, Traylon, and then you got Derrick Henry in the backfield. But outside of them, this is a top-heavy team. And this is a team that if they have one injury on offense, they could be screwed. And then if they have a couple on defense again, I think they will have the depth to overcome that. But I don't know if this offensive line is going to be good enough for this to be a playoff team completely. I mean, the Jacksonville Jaguars, luckily enough, the team that's favored to win this division, they have offensive line concerns themselves, which is why I'm not ruling out the opportunity that the Titans have to potentially surprise and win the AFC South. I do think that if I had to go on the confidence level of 1 through 10, their chances of winning the AFC South, my confidence meter would be a 6. I got the Jacksonville Jaguars at an 8. Just because they have the better quarterback. But I don't think there's a big transparency and talent between Tennessee and Jacksonville. I think Jacksonville is just up here and Tennessee is just a little bit beneath them. So I do think that if the Titans get to the playoffs with the addition of DeAndre Hopkins, it's going to be them winning this division. And if they don't win this division, I don't see how they get into the postseason. Like, it's just way too many great teams in the AFC with great quarterbacks and good head coaches that if Tennessee can't win this division and they have to backdoor their way into the playoffs, I don't think they're going to be able to get in, because I don't think this is a team that's going to win more than 9 games. I think 9 games is my best case scenario for the Tennessee Titans. Them winning 10 games would really surprise me. Brent Venables, a lot of my friends don't have a lot of confidence in him. I did a live stream with my guy College Football with Sam, and we were talking about Oklahoma making the transition to the SEC, and he was like, he just doesn't believe in Brent Venables. And, you know, I really don't understand why so many people are just so discouraged with Brent Venables after just one season. I mean, I get it that his defense was incredibly disappointing, and despite the fact that he didn't have the personnel to do ideally what he likes to do typically on defense, you don't expect to have one of the worst defenses in college football with a defensive-minded coach that has to resume a Brent Venables. You expect that defense to at least be a tad bit better than amongst the worst in college football. But I want to give my thoughts on, is Brent Venables in over his head at Oklahoma? Because I honestly don't believe that. I think that Brent Venables is a guy that, first of all, he's a really great recruiter. And if you're a really good recruiter, you're going to be able to assemble talent. And all talent alone, that can get you, if you have an ideal schedule, 3 or 4 wins right off the bat. Unless you're just a terrible head coach, which I don't believe that Brent Venables is. Even at worst, I think Brent Venables would be a below average coach that may underachieve more times than you would like. But you look at the fact that last season, you got to remember that his roster didn't really have a lot of depth. They had some injuries, especially at quarterback. They went into their rivalry matchup against Texas having to run Wildcat offense with Eric Gray. And listen, I love me some Eric Gray, big fan of him, but anytime you have to run your offense through him being your quarterback and the Wildcat offense, you know you're going to be in trouble. They got blown out by Texas in an embarrassing way. And then you look at the fact that it kind of was nothing they could do about it. You had no quarterback. So I don't really hold that completely over Brent Venables' head. Maybe I'm just one of those people that's just a tad bit more patient when it comes to coaches. I understand that not every coach goes into a situation like Brian Kelly or Lincoln Riley at USC and then they just completely are able to turn that thing around and get it going year one. And even though Brent Venables wasn't taking over a bad situation, it's like still, when they lost Lincoln Riley, like that was a huge gut punch to that program. Like they had to kind of regather themselves. They had to take a couple of deep breaths, and they had to kind of rechange some things. So for Brent Venables, he had to kind of rebuild the roster to his fashion without doing it in the way that Deion Sanders has, which is something that he kind of called out during Big 12 Media Days, but that's a topic for another day. And plus, you know, he had to kind of recruit really hard, which he did a really good job at that. They had the 4th best recruiting class in America last year. And if you're going to be successful in the SEC, the most important thing, or one of the most important things, is that you have to be an elite recruiter. Dan Mullen wasn't an elite recruiter. He was a great X's and O's guy, but he just wasn't good at assembling talent and developing talent at a high level, really. Brent Venables, I think he's a great recruiter, and I think he's going to be a good talent developer. And then you look at him when it comes to game management. I don't really think I look at Brent Venables and I think that he's an awful game manager. He's one of those coaches that makes a lot of boneheaded decisions with the game on the line. You got to remember that this is somebody who's been on 2 championship caliber staffs. Clemson, Oklahoma, under Bob Stoops. So Brent Venables, I think he has good amount of experience being around those coaches and being on those staffs, that he knows what you have to do and what you have to be able to build to have a program that's championship caliber. Now, how long is it going to take for Oklahoma to get to that level? We don't know, but I also like the fact that he's very charismatic. It seems like this is somebody that really gets his players to gravitate and play hard for him. So I don't think that Brent Venables is in over his head. I just think that 2022 was a little bit more unideal than what most people thought. And you got to remember that there were people who believed that Oklahoma could have been a 10-win football team last season. And maybe they could have if they didn't have the injuries that they dealt with, and Dylan Gabriel could have stayed fully healthy. But long term, I still trust Brent Venables. And there are some guys that I look at it year one and how they perform, and I just shake my head and I say it's not going to work. I don't look at Brent Venables in that way. I think that he does everything that you need in a good head coach, at least a head coach that can have you be in a sustainable program that can win you at least 8 games. You got to recruit well, which he's shown the ability to do. He has a really good staff. Jeff Levy is one of the best offensive coordinators in college football right now. You got a really good quarterback starting for you in Dylan Gabriel. You also got a really good QB behind him that's going to be the future. And I do think that you're going to be able to get things figured out. You're really good in the transfer portal. It's like everything that Brent Venables needs to do so far in terms of roster construction, I think has been really solid. Now, game management, he probably can improve on some things, but I don't expect that defense to be as bad as what it was this season or what it was last season this year. You got to remember that even Dan Lanning, head coach of Oregon, was the DC on Kirby's staff for years. Oregon's defense wasn't good last year. So even he's making a transition, and he's a really respected defensive mind. Jim Knowles at Ohio State, really respected DC. He wasn't able to make things shake year one with the Buckeyes. So you got to give some of these defensive-minded coaches some time. Sometimes it takes a while to, implement the kind of defense that you want, because I think with offense allows you to freelance a little bit more. It allows you to improvise, because on offense, sometimes things break down. You got to think on the win, but with defense, you miss an assignment, it's wraps. So Brent Venables, I don't think he's in over his head. I do still really like the hire of Brent Venables. I think that Oklahoma is going to be way better this season than what they were last year. And then they probably should be able to get the 8 wins. They're going to be 5-0 most likely going into their game against Texas. The couple of games that they played before that, Arkansas State, SMU, Cincinnati, Iowa State, are all games that they should win. Iowa State, we don't know how they're going to look this year. They looked really bad last year. Post Brock Purdy. Cincinnati, I just don't think they're that good this year. They don't have a lot of talent. They don't have a lot of returning starters, and they don't have a lot of depth. SMU could be an interesting game. Brett Lashley and the Ponies, they've been really active in the transfer portal. They got a really talented offense, a really talented QB. So if their defense can improve a little bit, they could be a little scary. And in Arkansas State, you should be able to smash them. So I think Oklahoma should be 5-0. And then they enter Big 12 conference play. I think they can at least win 3 other conference games. I don't think you're going to have a disastrous season in Big 12 play like you did last year, getting blown out by TCU and losing to Texas Tech. So let me know what you guys think about Brent Venables down in the comment section down below. Do you guys still have faith in him as the head coach of Oklahoma football? Now I got to get a sip of water before we get to the last segment. Before we move on, make sure that if you haven't already that you leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, make sure that you hit that bell icon so you don't miss when we upload a new video or when we go live. We go live every day at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. We also going to have a special guest on tonight on JT Sports After Dark at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going live with CTO Sports, Dallas Cowboys YouTuber. We're going to have him on providing insight about the Cowboys and also discussing a couple of teams in the NFC conference this year. And then if you support the channel and you're always asking JT, what can I do to help the channel grow? All you got to do is go to whichever podcasting service that you listen to, Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, and give us a 5-star review. That's all you got to do. Go to those podcasting platforms, whichever you use, type in the JT Sports Podcast and it will pop up. Give us a 5-star review. Or if you don't feel like typing and you're lazy, it's okay because there's a shortcut. All you got to do is go down to the description down below. You click that little down arrow on the right side. You scroll down until you find the Apple and Spotify links. You click one of those and give us a 5-star review that way. Just give us a 5-star review if you enjoy the content. If you have any suggestions, some questions that you would like answered, you can leave them in your review and they will get answered on a future episode. Make sure to rate the JT Sports Podcast 5 stars if you haven't already. Man, we finally got to talk about the Florida Gators, man. How good are the Gators going to be in 2023? Now, right now, a lot of Florida fans are feeling really happy because they're having a lot of success on the recruiting trail right now. And Billy Napier, he's been having a lot of smiles on his face, but the season is about to kick off. And right now, nobody is expecting anything out of Florida this year. And a lot of Gator fans are going to tell you, man, JT, like, it doesn't matter what Vegas thinks. All that matters is that people are doubting us. Those players and those coaches, they're going to rally behind that. They're going to get that underdog mentality, and they're going to over-exceed expectations this year. And, you know, it sounds good, but how is that going to be possible? And how good will Florida be in 2023? That's what we got to discuss. And if Florida is going to be able to overachieve this year, they need Graham Mertz to play at a solid level. Okay, now you got a really solid offensive line, despite the fact that you lost a couple of key players like Osiris Torrance to the NFL. You got a couple of good replacements in the transfer portal. You still have a couple of key guys coming back on the offensive line. So your run game should be really good. Having one of the best running back tandems in all of college football, and Trevor Etienne and Montrell Johnson, Your receiving core outside of rookie Pearsall is really unproven, even though I have a lot of confidence that Marcus Burke is going to have a really good season. He was the only receiver in the spring game outside of Pretty Ricky that actually looked really good and made some big plays. He had that one completion that he made on the sideline where it was I don't really think it was more so a great throw by Graham Mertz, but I just think that it was more of a better catch than it was a throw. And if he doesn't end up, catching that ball the way that he did, I think that's an easy incompletion. And also, even though we pride ourselves on being unbiased, you guys already know we're going to be biased when it comes to brothers from the 904. So we're going to give Marcus Burke the benefit of the doubt that he's going to have a breakout season this year. So I'm going to place my breakout label on Marcus Burke this year. And now they got a new defensive coordinator in Austin Armstrong. Again, he is really respected. And the fact that he's one of the youngest defensive coordinators in the Power 5 tells you how good of a football coach he is. He helped transform that Southern Miss defense to a top 50 defense in college football. And their defense does have a good amount of talent. I don't know how deep they are in the secondary, but their defensive line, the way people are talking about it, has a good amount of talent and depth on it. And that cornerback, I think you're really underrated there. You got Jason Marshall, a cornerback that's really good, that has a lot of NFL stock behind his name. I've seen a couple of mock drafts have him mocked for the first and second round of next year's draft. So he's definitely a guy to keep your eyes on. Really good cornerback, really underrated. And when you look at the Gators' schedule this year, depending on how well Graham Mertz plays, they potentially could be an 8-win team this year. But if they don't get good quarterback play or even serviceable QB play, I think they probably only win 4 games this year. And the SEC is so tough that if you don't have even serviceable QB play, it's going to be tough for you to survive. I don't think Florida is one of those teams that can carry a team like Georgia did with Stetson Bennett to a national championship. Their overall roster just isn't that talented enough. And if you're a biased Florida fan, of course you're going to disagree with that. But when you look at the overall talent that you have around Graham Mertz, it's not on the caliber of as an Alabama or Georgia. So I think for Florida, you do have the fact that you play Tennessee at home. Utah is going to be a tough game on the road, but you are playing them the first game of the regular season, which is always a great opportunity for teams to pull off upsets. You got Charlotte. You should win that game. McNeese State. So those are 2 easy wins right there. You got to go on the road to play Kentucky. That game could go either way, even though I think Kentucky I probably would take right now to be a favorite in that game, just because they got Devin Leary at QB. Their offensive line should be way better. They have 2 really good receivers, and their defense is going to be really good as well. So I think people are sleeping on Kentucky. You got Vandy. That could go either way. South Carolina, are they going to have a defense this year? And then after your bye week, that's really where your schedule gets really tough. You're going to have to pull off an upset against Arkansas, LSU at home on the road, Missouri on the road. Now, you do get Arkansas at home, which I think is a game you got a chance at being able to win. And then Georgia, you're probably not going to be able to beat them. I think all of us can agree with that Georgia just is on a different level than what Florida is right now. But Missouri, LSU, I feel like you might be able to pull off an upset in one of those 2 games. Even though I probably would take Missouri to be the game to do that, because Missouri is the definition of mid. And then Florida State, it's a rivalry game. So even though FSU is the more talented team on paper, those rivalry games have the capability of being able to get really tight and close due to, the kind of way that rivalry games tend to go. But overall, I think Florida probably could get the 6 wins this year. I'm not going to look at their roster and say that I got a lot of confidence they are a 6-win team on paper. It's just that I have a lot of faith in Billy Napier. And I tell you this every time, but I watched Billy Napier nearly every single game that he coached at Louisiana. I don't know why but I was a temporary fan of the Raging Cajuns when he was the head coach there. So I think that he's a pretty good coach. It's just that he has a really young team that he still is trying to rebuild and his way, his vision, and plus you're doing this in the SEC, and plus he isn't one of those guys that is just able to go crazy in the transfer portal like that. And he wasn't even able to get his ideal quarterback. According to a couple of Florida Gator fans out there in reports, his quarterback was Grayson McCall, but he wasn't able to transfer due to academic issues. So I think that Billy Napier, I still think that he's going to be able to find a way to get this team to over 5 wins. I do like Austin Armstrong. I think he's a really good addition on the defense side of the ball. I definitely think that this is going to be the best defense that Florida has had in a couple of years. They haven't had a good defense in a while, but I'm not saying this defense is going to be elite or anything, but this should be a pretty good unit. And the way their schedule lines up, I mean, you got to play Tennessee at home. So even though you may not be great, playing on the road in college football always puts the away team in some sort of disadvantage. So we'll see how that game goes. If your defense is good and Graham Mertz can be serviceable, you're going to have a chance to get the 8 wins. This is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel. We go live every day, Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Listen to the audio version of this podcast, available on all podcasting platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts from. You can find the JT Sports Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us with a 5-star review. We will greatly appreciate it. And I will see you guys back later tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, with JT Sports After Dark with CTO Sports.